Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a part 2 of Born to Be a. Written by Big Teddy G. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin nightlife. Once he had left the money with Yoshio, Izuku left them. He hovered around for a little while longer out of sight to make sure they didn't steal the money meant for everyone in the poorer section of the city and also to watch the police investigate the apartment. He was happy to see them begin to work on how to distribute all the money and then start to divide bills into large envelopes. Sano left soon after they started and Izuku made sure she got home safe from a distance. He only left when he heard loud flapping wings and turned to see a dragon in the sky headed to the apartment. He didn't want to be seen, so he left. He wanted to do some more research on many things he learned by speaking to Sano. More specifically, the legend of the quirk boogeyman with many quirks. Maybe this legend was like him, an experiment. With his mind settled, he flew into the dark and then paused when his stomach grumbled. His path diverted from the direction of the library and to that restaurant with the good food. Less than an hour later, Izuku sulked on a rooftop. Apparently, they were closed and opened the next day. That's how he learned that stores closed at select times. When he was done pouting, he jumped down onto the sidewalk. He hovered for a split second to cushion the fall and then began to wander the dark city. While he was peckish, he could handle being hungry for a while. He had spent days without food or sleep before, so skipping a meal wouldn't hurt. Plus, Izuku was almost certain that his quirk adapted to sustain his body with fewer resources. Or maybe it was just his mentality, Izuku wasn't too sure. He walked down the sidewalk with the lamp posts lighting his path. He looked at stores as he passed and what they contained inside them. He saw a few groups of people on the sidewalks, mostly congregating around bars. They laughed and pushed each other around, but it was obvious to see them having fun after work. Some walked with unsteady steps while others leaned on each other for balance while they sang songs bad enough for Izuku to know the song wasn't supposed to be sung that way. One older man behind a group stumbled near an alleyway. An arm reached out and grabbed him before anyone knew he was missing. Izuku narrowed his eyes at that and walked into the alleyway. No one was there, so he went deeper into the dark. He heard one voice clearly while the other belonged to the inebriated man as slurred words were mumbled out. It was clear the intoxicated man was being robbed. Izuku moved to stop it. He rounded the next corner and grabbed the robber by the shoulder as he pulled him away from his victim. The drunk man slumped against the wall, asleep. Meanwhile, Izuku got a good look at the criminal. He was young, just a bit older than himself. He looked scared and tried to hide it with anger, but Izuku could see the underlying desperation. The young man tried to shake Izuku's hand off his shoulder and bring up the box cutter to threaten him, but was stopped on both fronts. Izuku's other hand slapped the box cutter out of his hand and held the young man still. "Enough, what are you doing? What does it look like? Now, let me go." The young man tried to escape once again but cried in pain when the hand tightened on his shoulder. "Why are you robbing him? I can see this was your first time, so why?" Izuku's voice didn't rise, but it demanded to be answered with glowing green eyes shining on the young man. "I don't have any options left. I need the money. Now, let me go." He thrashed once again, but he was held still. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the boy. "You always have options, this is one of the worst ones. To hurt others for your benefit. I don't know why you need money, but find another way than this." He waved his hand to the unconscious drunk. "Or else you will find yourself dead one day." "How? Who would kill me for mugging a drunk?" He waved at the man facing down on the dirty alleyway. "I would," Izuku said calmly. The thrashing stopped and the boy stared at him. "What?" he said quietly. "I will not allow this kind of rot to fester in Japan. I will not let innocent people get hurt because of greedy or desperate people like you. If that means I have to end you, then so be it." Izuku let go of the boy and he fell limply to the ground as he stared up at Izuku. "So, choose. This. He waved to the drunk. Or find a better way. He motioned to the light down the alleyway. The boy didn't have to think hard to choose as he got up and ran. The last words he heard before leaving the alleyway rang in his head. Don't let me see you again. Izuku sighed and rubbed his forehead. He hoped the message was driven deep into the boy's head, he would not have another chance. He then looked down at the drunk man snoring and huffed. He grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and picked him up. He set the man's arm over his shoulder and walked him to the illuminated sidewalk. His hearing picked up a rustling of cloth over him and could tell someone was watching him. Once the man was dropped off, he looked up and stared into the eyes of a masked woman. Her eyes widened slightly at being caught but jumped down from the roof to stand before Izuku in the alleyway. Izuku could tell she was a hero. Most likely an underground hero by his guess. She wore an orange bandana on her head with a gas mask covering her mouth. The filters had yellow smiley faces on them. Her costume was a simple tank top with orange and green striped shorts. The hero looked Izuku up and down. She put a hand on her hip and pointed at him. Aren't you a bit young to be out so late? Izuku tilted his head. Am I? He asked in curiosity. The eyes narrowed behind the mask and she shook her head in apparent exasperation due to the young. You can get in trouble for what you did back there, you know. She jabbed a thumb over her shoulder, deeper into the alleyway. Trouble? With the law. For what? I did not use any quirk to stop the criminal nor any unnecessary force. Although his breaking of the law was long past, she didn't have to know that. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. And the death threats? Don't think I didn't hear that. She said with narrowed eyes. Izuku shrugged. Will you attempt to arrest me? Ms. Joke frowned slightly at the easy confidence of the young man's posture. He was completely relaxed under her glance. Too relaxed, as if she wasn't a threat. That sent alarm bells off in her head. She saw him easily handle the would-be mugger with extreme ease. She looked down at the drunk against the alley wall, safe and still asleep. She hummed in thought. Walk with me. She motioned to the alleyway. Izuku didn't see any harm in it so he followed her. She hopped onto a dumpster and scaled the wall to reach the roof. Izuku floated up and stood next to her as she peered over the edge to see an empty alleyway. She was startled slightly when she turned and saw him silently watching her. Quiet as a cat, huh? I know someone just like that. She chuckled to herself and paused when Izuku didn't make any noise. She cleared her throat at the quiet and continued. Come on. Izuku followed after her, quiet as a cat as she said. His training showed as his feet never made a noise nor did his clothes shuffle. She glanced once or twice at him and a few times at his feet when she heard nothing. She furrowed her brows when she didn't hear a thing. They walked for a while until they reached a tall building that overlooked a plaza filled with the life of the night. Nice, ain't it? She motioned to the bustling plaza. She squatted down to look around. Izuku took in the nice view and smiled. It is. They stayed quiet for a bit longer until the hero broke the silence. You've been trained, haven't you? You move way too quietly to be anything else. Izuku's smile dropped and he nodded. All I've ever known. I didn't like it so I left. She looked up at him at the tone of voice. She could hear more underlying in the words but she didn't pry just yet. Sounds rough, but I'm sure it could be worse. Anyhow, what's someone like you wandering the night? I wanted to go to the library but it was closed. He grumbled and then his stomach grumbled as well. And somewhere to eat but the place I wanted was also closed. He felt a tap on his arm and he took a proffered snack. Thank you. She bit into her own wrapped meal bar and nodded. What did you want to go to the library for? Manga. Sci-fi. Ornaments. She giggled at the end and turned to see his reaction but put off when he only looked confused at her. Research, specifications on the quirk boogeyman. I heard from someone that he was a legend. A man with many quirks. Do you know of this legend? Izuku asked and ate his bar. Her eyebrows shot up at the mention of the terrible legend. Yes, it's an open secret of sorts. Mostly about him appearing when quirks first came to be. He built up a criminal empire like none other by taking and giving quirks he stole. He disappeared some time ago as far as I know. She shivered at the mere idea of him. Izuku took the information in. He could still be alive. Theoretically, he could have taken any number of quirks to keep himself from aging or dying at all. Was he ever confirmed dead? Or just disappeared? He asked. She shook her head. Not sure, but I hope he's gone. No way I would want to fight someone who could take a quirk. The two lapsed into silence once again as they watched the crowds below them. Izuku thought about the legend and Ms. Joke thought about the boy beside her. The hero wanted to know more about this odd boy. She had a feeling there was more to him just with the brief interactions they had. There was a nibbling feeling in the back of her head that the green-haired boy was more dangerous than he seemed. The way he walked without a sound, the way he spoke as if he never had a conversation before, and the way he looked at everything around him like it was new. Even now, his eyes flickered from person to person below them. You seem about the right age to be one of my students. What school do you go to? Ms. Joke asked to probe for more information. Izuku looked down at her with slightly green glowing eyes and tilted his head. He saw her shiver but paid no mind to it. He turned back to the crowds of people. I don't go to school. She raised a brow after getting the shiver that shot through her body when he looked at her in control. You know truancy is a crime, I could take you just for that admission. Izuku fully turned to her after that statement. You seem like you want to but you're not sure if you can. So instead you ask all these questions to find more information about me. His eyes glowed brighter as he stared at the woman beside her. I am ignorant to many things but I am not a fool. What is it that you want? He honestly wanted to know. Ms. Joke stared into the toxic green eyes that bore into her and felt her mouth dry behind her mask. Who are you? She finally asked. Izuku tilted his head. Is that all? You are far too well trained to be anyone ordinary. You move quieter than some pros and I have a gut feeling that there's more. I never ignore my gut, it's never led me astray. She slowly stood up, not moving her eyes off the boy for a second. I am Izuku. He paused and saw the unasked question, so he obliged her. I am trained in many things. Ever since I could remember I was trained. Everything they thought I would need to be the perfect hero. All I ever knew was training and the lessons. He motioned to the bustling crowds below them with an arm. I never knew any of this, it's incredible. He smiled at the peaceful but loud crowds. Ms. Joke wet her lips behind her mask as she stared at the boy. She had a hand behind her touching an emergency beacon just in case. With a push of a button, all the active heroes in the area would come to help. Who are they? Izuku's smile faded as he was reminded of the island and the bald man. I called them white coats. I know now that they were researchers. None of them ever gave me their names but I knew their faces. For my whole life, they are all the people I interacted with. I didn't know then but I know what they did was not right. Hearing the words researchers connected the dots to the sunken island everyone had been talking about. About the secret research facility with dozens of bodies drowned below. You came from that island. She already knew his answer. Yes. He said simply. You killed all those people, drowned them. Yes, I didn't want any of them to live. I didn't want them to restart what they began somewhere else. Do what they did to me to someone else. I only regret one and I never knew his name. He smiled sadly at the memory of the bald man. The Hero Public Safety Commission created me to become their perfect hero. My guess it was to take over for All Might after he retired, but I never confirmed it when I questioned them. He furrowed his brows but relaxed and then shrugged. It does not matter now. Ms. Joke felt dread form throughout her body with each admission. She couldn't let him get away, he was far too dangerous to let free at the moment. If he had the power to sink an island and kill the heads of the HPSC, then he had the power to hurt so many more. She recalled the moment when Izuku set the drunk man down gently but shook it off. For the moment, he had to be apprehended until the law knew what to do with him. Izuku saw the moment when the hero attacked. She was fast, with no flashy movements, or showboating. She moved to end the fight within the first strike, and he smiled at the proper way to be a hero. It didn't matter how fast she moved, he dodged out of the way and grabbed her wrist to pin her. The sudden reversal didn't stop her as she swung her body to knee him in the stomach. He blocked with his other hand and stuttered when a burst of laughter erupted from him. He tried to stop but recognized it immediately as a quirk. He had fought with worse impairment. Not wasting time, he grabbed her by the collar and shot into the sky where he had control. Her eyes widened as her feet left the rooftop. She turned to Izuku, whose eyes began to tear up as he laughed even harder. He didn't move his eyes off of Ms. Joke as they flew up. Those glowing toxic eyes bore into her until they reached the clouds high above. She cut off her quirk at the unsaid warning. "What's your plan now? Kill me?" Ms. Joke asked the boy with her life in his hands, literally. Izuku let go of her collar and held her wrist to wipe his face from the tears that cropped up due to the laughter. That was unpleasant but effective. To answer your question, no, I will not kill you. I do not hurt innocent people, and you are a good hero as far as I can tell. You move to subdue quickly and end the fight instead of looking for glory. As a proper hero should, end the fight before it can begin to avoid any damage. Ms. Joke clung to his hand on her wrist as he spoke. She felt some relief at hearing his answer. She could tell he didn't lie. For what reason did he have to lie? Don't hurt innocents. What about the board of the HPSC? None of them were innocent. They admitted to releasing low-level villains for heroes to subdue to keep the public's opinion positive on the HPSC. I watched them come to the island and watch me train. Watch me like a prize tool, waiting for me to be ready for them. If they did that, then what else did they do that they hid? He shook his head in disgust at the dead board. Then the law should have taken care of it. You are not judge, jury, and executioner. Izuku shook his head. They were the law, they would escape punishment just as easily as those villains escaped prison. Underground heroes knew of the darker side of the hero business, so she had an inkling of what Izuku spoke of, but it was her job to prevent what he did anyways. So what, are you going to kill every villain you come across? She tried to reason with him. Yes. The quick answer caused her brain to stutter. What? Not every criminal, of course. Those who steal food to survive would not be the same as those who steal because of greed. Just those who will never bring anything good to society, the rot of Japan. He explained calmly. She shook her head and stared into the glowing green eyes. That doesn't make you any better than those villains. She paused and took a breath. You kill because you have the power to. That's not right. Please just come with me and I can get you help. You're right, what the HPSC did to you wasn't right, but this isn't the way. Izuku tilted his head. While I thank you for your compassion, I know what I want to do with my life. They trained me to be a protector of Japan, so I will keep the innocent people of Japan safe by any means necessary. He smiled at her attempt to sway his mind. Even now, she tried to subdue Izuku with words when actions showed to be futile. Now, I'll drop you off at a hospital. They are very easy to find, I've come to find out. Her eyes widened and then she slumped when Izuku stuck her in the right place to knock her out. He picked her up in a princess carry and flew off. Far below him, dozens of red and blue flashing lights illuminated the previously crowded plaza. He could see a few scattered people uniquely dressed, heroes, he guessed. It didn't matter as he flew high over them. It didn't take long for Izuku to find a hospital nearby. He landed in front of the entrance. He gently set the good hero down and left just as medical personnel began to make their way to him. Izuku flew high up again and began to think of a plan to begin his purge. Help would be appreciated, after all, he wasn't a god. Maybe if a message were to spread of what he would do, then others would join in his cause. He would have to think about it further. For now, he wanted to see the greener parts of Japan. Even from the distance the woods looked pretty. Anticipation. Tsukachi rubbed his forehead in the privacy of the empty hospital hallway. His mind was reeling as he processed the words of Emi Fukukado. His hand shook slightly in tremors from various emotions running through his body. From anger at the HPSC who groomed and created a child to become their tool. Fear at hearing how easily Ms. Joke was subdued and the admission Izuku told her of him killing the head of the HPSC and the whole island he came from. Dread at what would be coming in the future from his words to Ms. Joke. And finally sadness for Izuku, the super soldier boy who never knew the love of a family or the comfort of a home. Sansa Tamakawa, his cat-headed partner in all but name, spoke up. Maybe we can talk to him before he does something we won't be able to forgive. He said hopefully. Detective Tsukachi straightened with a sigh. If we can find him, that is. How do you find a super soldier boy new to the outside world who can fly and be trained in who knows what? Tamakawa rubbed his ear. If I was him I would be exploring the world. You heard what she said. He was smiling as the plaza did its own thing. Maybe send officers to more notable locations. Green hair is somewhat distinctive. Nodding along, Tsukachi shrugged. That might work. But keeping him from leaving is another matter. Ryuku and her intern are the only ones I can think of that can fly. Hawks is still in a coma due to Izuku most likely. He recalled his condition the last time he heard of the hero. And Endeavor isn't a long-distance flyer. I'll have the officers to know if they find him to stall him and not engage, Tamakawa noted. Tsukachi smiled at his partner and nodded. Thanks, Tamakawa. He sighed and began to walk down the hall. Let's hope he doesn't do anything too criminal. Izuku, the genetically engineered boy, giggled as the waters of the ocean lapped at his feet. He had taken off his shoes and socks to walk into the cold morning waters of the beach. He was speechless when he found the picturesque scene of the sun rising on an empty beach. He immediately landed and stared out into the waters as the sun got higher and higher. He enjoyed the cool breeze of the ocean and the sound of lapping water on the beach. Now, his feet sunk into the sand as he played in the waters. He crouched down to let the cold water run through his hands and smiled at the peaceful time. He picked up shells to look at them and then set them down after admiring them. One such shell contained a very irate crab. Izuku smiled as the crab snapped its pincers at the one who disturbed its rest. He set the little creature down where he found it and moved on. At some point, Izuku decided to swim in the cool waters. Not just because it looked nice but also to experiment with his quirk or quirks. He still didn't know which was true. He leapt into the waves and sank underwater. There wasn't much to see but the few fish were neat nonetheless. His training included swimming for hours on end in a small pool, but the feeling of the ocean was completely different. He swam lazily at first, just enjoying his time. Then, he tried his quirk to fly. He wondered if he could use his quirk to under the water, and when he was propelled forward like a torpedo. He propelled himself through the waters at high speeds. He didn't know how far he was from the shores, but he was sure he could find it when he surfaced. He angled his body up and broke to the surface into the morning light. He brushed his messy green hair back and looked around. He found the shore and narrowed his eyes. He smiled and then shot himself at full speed towards the beach. The sound barrier shattered and a wake in the water followed him to shore. He arrived at the place where he discarded his clothes in moments. He came to a stop and the vacuum behind him collapsed, causing the air to shoot in every direction. Sand went everywhere. Izuku was blinded for a moment, but he grinned like a child. He waved his hand to clear the sand in the air and it finally settled. His clothes were partially buried in sand but that didn't bother him in the least. He laughed a bit when he noticed that he was completely NDE. He wasn't sure when it happened but his underwear was ripped apart during his play. He shrugged and clothed himself once again before sighing as he caught the faint sound of police sirens in the distance. He already knew they would be looking for him, admitting his deeds to the hero the day before would put them on his tail. But Izuku didn't care. He didn't want to hide all his life to live freely, so he chose his path. Just as he lifted off the ground, he noticed in the distance a large mass flying in his direction. Most likely it was the dragon from the apartments. He watched the dragon flap its massive wings for a moment before he decided he should leave and avoid trouble. He turned up to leave but was surprised when there was a young woman in his path. The first thing he noticed about the young woman was that she was pretty. The next thing he noticed was that she was using her quirk to try and contain him. He shook off the hormones in his head and focused on the young hero trying to stop him. She yelled out in a chipper voice. "Hold on. Don't go anywhere for a moment." Izuku broke out of the waves of energy containing him and shot into the air. He broke the sound barrier again and appeared in front of the young hero. He wasn't going to hurt her. He saw the way she tried to contain instead of attacking and she had asked nicely. So, he stayed for a moment to see what she said. Nijire was startled by the shockwave of his speed and the sudden appearance in front of her. She readied an attack when she noticed he wasn't doing anything, just floating in the air. What are you doing?" she asked. "Nijire. What's he doing?" Ryuku, her boss, asked through the earpiece. "Hold on. I just asked him that," she responded. She turned to him who watched her curiously. "I'm waiting, as you asked. What are you doing?" Izuku tilted his head in consideration. "Well, I wasn't expecting you to stop. Most people don't listen to me when I fight them. Unless it's practice, then we have to listen to our opponents just in case they call a pause. Why did you listen?" "This isn't practice," she said in rapid fire. Izuku shrugged. "I wanted to see what you had to say. I'm supposed to arrest you but Ryuku said not to engage in combat and only slow you down. Even now, I don't think I can beat you and I'm super strong. How'd you move so fast? I was told you are very dangerous but you don't seem that bad, then again my friend looks harmless but he's just as strong as me." Izuku's eyebrows rose as she kept talking and he felt a bit overwhelmed at the rapid words. He wasn't trained for this. "I figured you were here to slow me down for Ryuku, that dragon I'm guessing." He motioned at the much closer reptile. "Yep. It's really nice of you to stay where you are." She smiled brilliantly. He shook his head. "I don't want to hurt any hero that does their job properly. As I said, I wanted to see what you had to say but I won't be captured." He paused and searched for the words. "Have a good day," he said politely, then he shot into the sky. Nijire tried to contain him once again when he spoke of leaving but it was futile as he disappeared with a sonic boom. She looked around but saw nothing. She groaned and stomped her foot in midair. At least he was nice, she grumbled. Ryuku arrived at Nijire's side not a few seconds later. She was also turning her massive head around but she also saw nothing in the clear sky. "Are you alright?" "Yeah, I'm fine." He didn't even fight. He stopped when I said to stop, which was nice of him, but he escaped. Nijire whined. "What did he say?" Ryuku gave up on looking and turned to her in turn. "What did you two speak of?" "He wanted to know what I had to say and that he wouldn't hurt me because he thought I was a good hero." "No. A hero who did their job properly, that's what he said." Then he left. Ryuku was quiet for a long moment as she thought about those words. If Nijire wasn't a proper hero as he said, then would he have fought her? That was an interesting piece of information. "Tell me what you thought of him." Nijire paused and furrowed her brow as she thought back to the interaction. He was calm the whole time, relaxed. As if I wasn't a threat. High above, Izuku watched the two figures fly away in an unknown direction. He hummed and thought at the interaction. Maybe there were good heroes, that made him happy. He was somewhat worried that all heroes were corrupt like the ones he had seen, but it was obvious that he was wrong. He had seen two heroes who were not fit to be heroes and two who deserved to be heroes. It was becoming more clear that there were good and bad heroes. But with the retirement of the strongest hero would come a wave of criminals that would take the opportunity to cause damage to Japan. That's where he would come in and make sure the rot was managed. Izuku lazily floated away from the shores and went to the thickest parts of the woods to admire the scenery. He flew lower to brush against the canopy of the trees. He smiled as birds flew at his passing and wildlife skittered across the forest grounds. He thought some more about heroes and what else he should do to help Japan, but his mind wandered to the peaceful forest. He landed on the forested ground and began to wander deeper into the woods. He examined each plant with fascination. If he caught any insects wandering, he sat in front of them and watched them crawl along for a while. He smiled as he picked one up and felt its small legs on his hand. When he had enough fun, he gently set the creature back on the leaf he found it on. Izuku was startled by a whining noise in the woods and slowly followed its sound to find a bug with wings sitting on a log making the sound. It was loud as he stood near the creature. He got closer and poked it. The bug stuttered its noise and then it flew off to find a more peaceful tree trunk. Izuku smiled as it flew away and let it be. As he walked, he picked up neat rocks. Some were very smooth as if something had worn them down for decades. Other rocks were shining when the light hit it at an angle. He wondered how some had gotten to the middle of the wooded area. He could imagine some children playing with their quirks and launching them into the distance. He wondered what else was hidden in the woods. Just as he was going to continue his wandering, his stomach grumbled loudly. He frowned as he recalled the last time he ate, so with a sigh he lifted off the ground and flew off to find a meal. He hoped the restaurant he went to last time was open already. He kept an eye open to anything else flying in the area, he didn't want to get caught off guard again. As he flew, he did see some figures looking around with unique clothes. He wondered how desperately they were looking for him. Did they want to end him? Stop his actions? Or something else? Izuku wasn't entirely sure, even with the encounter with the young hero didn't tell him too much. She could have been following orders to capture him, or she defied the orders to kill him and tried to capture him. Either way, he would have to keep an eye on their actions to find out what they intended. He found the place he had eaten last time and landed in a nearby alleyway. He glanced around as he made his way into the food court. Just as he took a step forward, someone grabbed him by the back of his jacket and dragged him back into the alleyway. He jerked away immediately and turned to whoever grabbed him. An older man with a purple jacket, peach scarf, and glasses stood back with his hands raised. His silver hair was combed to the side and he had a smile that put Izuku on edge. "Whoa. Easy. Just wanted a chat is all," the man said with a toothpick in the corner of his mouth. Izuku didn't lower his guard as he watched the man. He took everything in like he was taught. He looked for allies of the man, hidden or not. He looked for weapons on the man, but he saw none. He searched for any obvious signs of a quirk, but he saw nothing physical on his body. He prepared to end the threat either way. "Hey. Look, how about we start with names? I go by Jiren." When the young man didn't respond, he sighed and continued. "Well, I'm a man who works with all kinds of people. I can get you information, gear, and even allies," he said with a big smile. "I just offering my services to someone capable as far as I've seen." "What do you mean all kinds of people?" Izuku narrowed his eyes at Jiren. He had a feeling he knew already, but he didn't like it. "Let's just say I don't discriminate. If someone needs a place to sleep, then I can get it. If someone needs a weapon, then I can get it. Simple as that," he said with a shrug. I've got some people interested in meeting with you. You said you could get me information. He smiled and nodded. That's right, for a price of course. The payment is flexible. What about villain organizations, gangs, and other groups like them? Jiren winced slightly. Well, I can do some of them. Others are off-limits, premium members if you catch my drift. Unless you do some favors for me, then I can see what I can do. He said, grinning. Izuku nodded. He made his decision and shot forward with his arm wound up to strike. Jiren's eyes widened just in time to see the arm chop down against his neck. There was a sickening crack and Jiren's neck twisted in a way that shouldn't have been possible. He grabbed him by the head with one hand and then jammed his finger into the side of the man's head. It penetrated his skull and destroyed the brain. He had no qualms with ending a man like Jiren. While on the island, Izuku learned of how villain organizations got some of their supplies to function. Most were stolen, others bought with stolen money, and finally, there were the few who used people like Jiren. Brokers worked with anyone who paid them enough. It didn't matter who or what they dealt with, only the money mattered. Whether it be drags, weapons, or people, brokers would traffic anything. They were the most used ways to connect villains, and taking them out would cause damage to villain organizations. Once he made sure the broker had no way of surviving his attack, he checked his pockets. He found a lot of money, a few phones, and a bladed weapon. He cleaned his hands and took the money while leaving everything else. He took one of the phones and dialed emergency services so they could collect the body and hopefully use the phones to find more information about who he worked with. Izuku sighed as he thought how useful it would have been if he knew how to use technology. While on the island, he only dealt with paper and pencils, so he was clueless in many of the devices. He left the phone operator trying to speak to anyone who was listening and went to his primary objective, food. He crossed the street and made his way to the restaurant. He eagerly waited in line and looked at the menu once again. It wasn't necessary as he already knew what he wanted. For here or to go? The cashier asked. Izuku began to say for here, but he caught a conversation. He turned to see two policemen talking into their devices and looking right at him. He frowned slightly and turned to the cashier. To go, please. He took the paper receipt, tossed it in the garbage immediately, and watched the police begin to evacuate the food court out of the corner of his eye as he waited. He had to admire the way everyone left the area without question. It was very organized. It didn't take long before his food was ready. He took the offered bag and left the building. He ignored the police who backed away from him and flew off with his precious package in hand. Rooftop Meal and Entertainment Subject 1, or Izuku as he calls himself, sat on a high building similar to the one Hawks tried to capture Izuku on the first night. He sat and ate his meal from a plastic bowl. Not knowing what to expect, he was happily surprised to find it very simple to eat away from the restaurant. He enjoyed the meal very much as he ignored the woman in a nice dress and the young woman near her, waiting for him to finish his lunch. It wasn't very long after he sat down on the roof edge that he heard the flapping of wings and the young woman's chatter. He stared at them as he took his first bite of his katsudon. He watched the dragon transform into a woman with fascination, but after she just watched him and talked into a device, he ignored her. He could see the young woman restrain herself from coming over to him and talking about whatever was on her mind at the moment. Currently, his eyes were set on the city skyline and at millions of people in them. He smiled softly at seeing people go to their destinations and enjoyed seeing them smile freely. He wanted to keep that how it was now and forever. Izuku turned from watching people walk far below him and to the woman who was walking closer slowly. He wondered if her quirk was just the ability to transform into a dragon or if she had some other facets of being a dragon. He knew very little about dragons, so he was clueless. She didn't say anything right away, so he put the empty bowl into the bag and closed it for later disposal. You're very young, no older than my intern here. The woman spoke. Izuku tilted his head in curiosity. Am I? I don't have any references. He said with a shrug. The woman pursed her lips and watched him neatly set the bag to the side. How old are you? 15. 16. I was never told that information. Seems useless in their grand picture, which I have to disagree with. If I was too young, no one would take me seriously, but being too old would compare me to the veterans with no time in the field. So, it is true about the HPSC grooming you to become a weapon for them? The woman asked. Izuku looked at the woman. Why would I lie? To validate the reason you killed them. Ryuku. The young woman finally spoke up in abhorrence at what her mentor just said. Izuku's eyes flickered to the young woman and was again pleased at her reaction. You don't believe they would do such a thing? Ryuku shook her head. Oh, don't get me wrong. I can believe it, but your actions are criminal. He frowned at that response. You are not surprised by their actions. So, you knew they were willing to do such things. He fully turned to Ryuku. That's neither here nor there. You will be coming with me. We don't know what to do with you just yet, but you are a threat. Izuku watched her muscles tense. But he had a strong feeling she had no chance of winning against him, and she knew it. Why else would she be talking or buying time? Either she is the kind of person to talk people down like the young woman, or she wants answers while waiting for backup. He sighed and grabbed the bag of trash to dispose of. He stood up from the edge of the roof and began to float. I rather not fight any heroes. Even if they are suspect in what they say or do. He said with narrowed eyes. I suggest you stand down, or else you will be injured, possibly severely. Nijire. Ryuku shouted as she dashed forward. Nijire leapt up above them and began to use her quirk to force Izuku down onto the roof. Instead of going with the force pushing him down, he stayed where he was. His clothes rippled from Nijire's quirk as he locked eyes with the young woman. Her eyes widened at his ability to resist her quirk so easily. Ryuku stopped after taking a step. She expected him to fall from the sky, but she was mistaken. Izuku's glowing eyes were visible to the two of them in broad daylight. He turned from Nijire to Ryuku. I understand why you continue to pursue me even though you are well aware you can't stop me. And for that, I admire you. He locked eyes with Ryuku. But I will be leaving, whether you permit it or not. Nijire. Get away from him. Ryuku shouted. She was about to do so but panicked slightly when she lost sight of Izuku. The sound barrier breaking told her he was right behind her. Just as she turned, she was grabbed and covered by his body. A wave of intense heat washed over them, most of it blocked by Izuku taking all the fire. Endeavor. Stop. Ryuku shouted in horror at seeing her in turn getting consumed by flames. The number 2 hero snuffed out his stream of fire to see his target, only to see him covering Nijire with his body. His shirt and jacket were burnt off from the intense heat. Nijire under him was burned slightly but was still breathing and unconscious. Izuku grabbed her and gently floated down to set her on the roof while staring at the flaming hero. Once Nijire was safely set down, Ryuku ran to her in turn to check her over. Izuku floated away from the pair and eyed the newest person on the roof. I was told you were dangerous. I see nothing more than a child. Endeavor arrogantly said. Izuku tilted his head as he spoke. You don't care that she was in the crossfire? That you would have killed her if I didn't protect her? He scoffed. She should have been more reactive. She had plenty of time to get out of the way, but she didn't. So long as the threat is dealt with, nothing else matters. Ryuku snarled at her coworker. How dare you? I was taught the same. So I will neutralize the threat on this roof. Izuku's eyes blazed green as he shot forward. Endeavor felt the shock of impact on his arm and then felt immense pain as his arm was shattered. Before he could wash the area in flames, his other arm was broken in the same place as his other. Endeavor reeled back and attempted to shoot off the roof to gain distance, but felt his knee bend in an unnatural direction when he was about to extend it to jump. He screamed in pain and began to expel as much fire in every direction, but he felt one last thing shatter as his jaw turned into powder. His world turned black and he lay unconscious on the roof, never getting another hit on his target. Ryuku watched the number 2 hero break under Izuku's fists and kicks. Each strike was fluidly transferred into the next without losing any speed. The DMT arm was disabled, then the other just as Endeavor tried to attack. Finally, his mobility was subdued, followed by a brutal punch to the jaw. She shivered at seeing such skill and power. The only time he was ever hit was when he protected Nijire from the fire blast. Izuku held the limp form of the number 2 hero aloft. He looked at the man with distaste. Without much care, he tossed him onto the roof and looked at Ryuku, who watched him as she stayed by Nijire. As I said before, the innocent are not my target. People like him, Izuku pointed at the broken form of Endeavor. Are. People who use their power to hurt people needlessly will be pulled by the root. By his actions, my guess is that wasn't the first time he did not care for collateral damage. If I find he has done so again, I will kill him. That goes for everyone who is a hero. I will not tolerate such negligence as that or the thrill of glory of having power over others. You wanted information on me, didn't you? That's what I will give you. Who are you to determine life and death? You'll never be a hero, we don't kill. Ryuku managed to get out. Heroes are trained to subdue villains and criminals to be processed into the law. You are not doing that. Izuku motioned to Endeavor. Seems to me that he had no issue with killing me and her in the crossfire. As for me being a hero, I was trained before I could remember. Every minute of every hour I was trained to be a hero, and I see now that I am outside that the law is corrupt. In only 2 days, I've found that corruption in both heroes and the law releasing repeat villains to be captured again. How many lives can be saved by making sure vile men and women will never draw another breath? A dead villain can never hurt anyone ever again. With that, Izuku flew off. Ryuku furrowed her brow in thought of what he had said, but put it out of her mind as she focused on the injured people around her. She pulled out her communicator and called for medical assistance for 2. She looked over Nijire once again. Several burns covered her, but nothing that wouldn't heal. The hair would take a while to grow back, but that was inconsequential. Endeavor, on the other hand, was a mess. Both arms were visibly broken and his knee was bent in the wrong direction. His jaw would need extensive surgery if she had to guess. Izuku flew away from the roof and the police that surrounded the base of the building. He made his way higher into the sky and felt the breeze on his chest. He was reminded that his shirt was burned away by Endeavor, as Ryuku called him. He frowned slightly and made a note to research the higher-ranked heroes to be more prepared for the future. He thought of where he could get more clothes and remembered the place that sold good food also was nearby a mall. He had caught a glimpse of stores selling clothes. With that, he diverted course. An hour later, Izuku was flying back over the forest with a new shirt and jacket. The store owner seemed to be wary of him when he arrived half naked, but paid it no mind when he handed over the money to buy the clothes. He was just lucky he decided to keep the money he took from the villains in his briefs and not hire on his body, otherwise, he would need to hunt for a few villains. When he was well out of range of any civilization, Izuku dropped into the trees and began to wander. He has so much left to explore in the new world he never got to see until now. He was able to creep up to a few animals to observe them closer by levitating off the ground to not scare them. He greatly enjoyed seeing the animals graze on the foliage of the brush. It was very relaxing for Izuku just to wander. Bit by bit, the sun began to lower. He took the opportunity to fly above the canopy of the trees to see the sunset. Oranges mixed with red and purple mixed in until it became dark. Slowly, the stars began to shine after hours of watching the sky. All the while, Izuku sat on nothing above the trees. He looked around to find a nice place to rest and found a clearing with a grassy hill in the middle. He brushed some of the foliage on one side and lay down to continue watching the stars. It was when the sun began to shine on his eyes when he woke up. He let out a large yawn and stretched until he felt satisfied. With a happy sigh, he hopped onto his feet and looked around. He placed where the city was and picked a random direction farther into the woods he would explore. As he walked, he observed all kinds of creatures and plants. He was very curious about the fungi he saw but knew enough not to touch them. However, when he thought about his possible quirk, he wondered if he could gain immunity to certain kinds of fungi or poisons. It was a thought for another day as he didn't want to train, he trained for his whole life. As he walked, he picked up various things that intrigued him. From smooth rocks that fit in his hand comfortably to abnormally straight sticks. Why did he pick them up? Various reasons, such as they looked uniform, satisfying to look at, and most especially because Izuku was still a boy who liked to pick up neat things. With a pocket full of neat rocks, he flew off to explore more of Japan's wilderness. He played with a mirror-smooth stone in his hands as he watched a large group of children use their quirks to extreme measures. Izuku was high in the sky sitting crisscrossed looking far below him at the camp, he didn't know what else to call it, of children. There were a few adults in hero attire similar to a cat and 2 other adults. One looked like a homeless man with a scarf and the other had sharp protruding tusks. The latter looked like a hero and the former acted like a veteran hero. Even with the homeless man's appearance, he watched everything and everyone with intensity. He turned his attention to the children, he supposed they were his age but he didn't feel like their age. They were all unique in their appearances and actions. From a simple girl with brown hair and now outward mutations to a large boy with 6 arms webbed together. He watched each one with curiosity. Their quirks were also interesting to watch. Especially when a large explosion was loosed into the air. In another place, ice covered a large patch of earth and then melted away slowly. Farther away, some sort of white material was expelled from someone's elbows. Nearby, 2 ate at a prodigious rate while they created things out of nothing and exercised. As he watched, he began to guess their quirks from a distance. A few were easy to guess, others were much more complicated. That has to be some sort of shadow construct. Maybe it's also sentient, with how it moves it is very possible. He said to himself and motioned with his straightest stick. She's just invisible. Unless she can do more but not enough information. He tapped his chin with the stick. Tail mutation, unless. Nope, just a tail. And he has adhesive hair in the shape of spheres. He squinted at one short boy and then shrugged. Quirks are very unique and odd. The children took a break and Izuku switched his focus to the adults. From a glance, he could tell the 4 dressed similarly like cats were on a team of some sort. Why they would choose feline costumes while none of them had any sort of feline-like quirks he would never know. But from his distant examinations, he could tell the 4 were usually a cheerful group who cared about their work. They smiled while watching over the children and pushed their training when they lagged. While some of the children took it in stride, others were less than grateful. Izuku frowned at seeing some of the children snap at the heroes trying to help and train them. He wondered if this was how the bad heroes began. Malicious children who grow up to be dangerous adults with the power to abuse. He shook his head, he would have to wait to judge them. Some plants could take a while to grow properly. Instead, he focused on the nicer-looking children. He wondered if this training camp was some sort of school. He had some vague knowledge about hero schools and wondered if the children below him were such hero prospects. Eraserhead, I've been getting a ping on my quirk. Just out of my range, straight east. Ragdoll said to the disheveled underground hero. Aizawa showed a curse in his mind. It was one thing after another this year, he thought. First was the trials which ended a building collapsing on 4 students. Then, the USJ attack and the grievous injuries to some of his students. He wasn't left unscathed as his missing eye itched. Todoroki's self-destructive refusal to use part of his quirk ended with half of his hand frozen off on live television. Tenya Ida's death at the hands of the man who crippled his brother. Then there is the mess of the midterms, half the class failed the practical. One mess after another with this year's cursed class. How many? When did you pick it up? He quickly asked as he thought of their planned evacuation should things go bad, again. Just one and it's been there all day. A scout you think? Should we evacuate or send someone to apprehend them? Aizawa considered his options. I'll go, you all stay on guard and I'll keep in touch with the communicator. If so much as one thing goes wrong, get the children out of here. Ragdoll nodded and Aizawa began to make his way into the woods to the east. While Izuku floated high in the air and tried to carve a stone with his fingernail into the shape of a tree, it wasn't going well. He gave up on carving a tree when the stone cracked in half and instead focused on the homeless-looking man begin to walk into the woods alone. He wondered what he was doing. Camping Izuku lay parallel to the ground high in the air as he looked down at the homeless-looking man traverse the woods in his direction. He noticed the man, probably a hero, begin to make his way in his direction. He thought nothing of it until he moved to get a better view of the second group of children and the man changed direction to head his way once again. He moved once more to see if he was truly coming for him or just a coincidence. For a third time, he headed to where he floated high in the air or at least under him. Definitely has some sort of tracking quirk to be able to find me. As for why? If he is guarding children then it would make sense to be aware of all possible threats in the area. As for his intentions if he finds me. Well, most heroes have been made aware of me so not great. Izuku hummed to himself and tapped the stone in the shape of a tree if you squinted hard enough. Same protocol, observe and then engage if wanted. Maybe ask why they are all here. Still unknown quirk so watch for that. He nodded to himself and began to lazily do barrel rolls as he continued to work on his sculpture. Far below, Aizawa quietly made his way through the trees. He scanned the area constantly and was in communication with Ragdoll constantly for updates on locations. So far, whoever was near the camp was able to move extremely quickly. He couldn't tell if they knew he was on his way to find them or if it was just a coincidence that they moved that often. Aizawa was on edge as he got closer and closer to the unknown person. He looked at the time and it was beginning to change from a bright day to a dimming sunset. Be aware, you will come into contact with the unknown shortly. They have not moved since the last position change. A communication device sounded in his ear. Eraserhead quietly responded. Understood. He moved slowly and quietly in the direction of the unknown person. He kept his one eye scanning constantly for threats or even a sign of passing but there wasn't a single sound or sign of anything abnormal. His whole body was tense in preparation for moving in case of an ambush but nothing happened. He looked everywhere, from treetops to feeling the earth's vibrations or the trees to see if any were hiding someone. You have passed the unknown. Ragdoll's voice sounded in his ear. Aizawa froze and turned around. I have not seen anything suspicious, please confirm where the unknown is. There was a long pause before Ragdoll said quickly. Unknown has moved to be right beside you. Eraserhead snapped his head to the side and scanned the earth then up in the trees. He stopped when he made eye contact with a young man the age of his students. Contact, young male. Green eyes and hair, confronting. He stopped whispering and spoke loudly to the boy, his whole body tense to attack or defend. Who are you and why are you here? He tightened his grip on his scarf and ready to activate his quirk. Izuku tilted his head as he watched the hero tense. I'm Izuku and I'm exploring. He stood on a tree branch looking slightly down at the man. Who are you? A hero I'm guessing. You are on private property and a secure site. Why have you been watching my class? Class. Like 1A. That hero school. Is this UA? He looked unimpressed at the idea of the famous school being so remote and small. I figured hero schools would have been more sophisticated. Not this place. He motioned to the woods. Aizawa furrowed his brows at the boy. He couldn't sense a single sign of dishonesty. Why are you here? He refuses to believe he was simply walking in the woods only to stumble upon the secure site they chose last minute. Izuku shrugged. I already said. I was exploring and saw your class training and watched in curiosity. You didn't answer my question, is this UA? Aizawa pursed his lips before answering. No, this is not UA. He thought of his next move and made his choice. You'll need to come with me, I cannot allow you to leave with the knowledge of where this location is. Izuku tilted his head. Either he didn't recognize Izuku or he hadn't gotten any news of Izuku's identity. He hummed and thought, he did want to get a closer look at their training but felt sure that they wouldn't let him roam freely. He didn't like being confined in any way. He shrugged and went with his idea. He would go with the hero and if they tried to restrain him then he would just leave. Izuku dropped down from the tree branch and landed with a slight thump. Much quieter than most would manage. I don't dash, he deftly dodged the white scarf that shot in his direction. I see now. He said with a sigh. Aizawa didn't say anything in response but kept trying to tie Izuku up in his scarf but was failing to do so. With each step, he dodged the reaching end of the scarf. With fluid movement, he avoided every single attack. Not only was it obvious that Izuku was trained but trained extensively. Aizawa could not tell if it was a quirk or pure skill but activating his quirk would show him. As he did so, he cursed under his breath as he saw it had no visible effect on the dodging form of Izuku. Not a single reaction at erased quirk. Aizawa paused in his attempt to capture Izuku and stared at him. Who trained you? Izuku smiled wistfully at the image of the man. I don't know his name, I always called him the bald man in my head. He's gone now. He sighed. The hero frowned slightly. This wasn't any regular training, was it? He already knew the answer but asked anyway. Izuku tilted his head. I'm not sure. I don't have much to compare it to. I never did any of what your class was doing. But I do know I've been training for all my life until recently. Until I left. Aizawa had a bad feeling but had to ask. Left where? Training all his life. Nothing to compare it to. Red flags shot high as he watched the boy carefully. I don't know if it had a name but it was a research island for the Hero Public Safety Commission. They raised me under there to become their tool and weapon. When this All Might retired or died, I was supposed to take his place. I never confirmed that but it was my best guess. When I wanted to leave, they didn't let me. So I left anyway, they couldn't stop me. With each word, a cold spike of dread sunk deeper into his chest. He wetted his lips and did his best to keep his voice steady. And what do you think of the outside? Why lie? For what reason? His moments proved the truth. Not once was he grazed by his scarf and he had ample chance to counterattack. It's incredible. It's so appealing in so many ways but also not. Izuku's beaming smile slipped at the end. There are too many people infecting the world with their rot. I've been helping at every chance I get. He had to keep the boy talking and convince him his class and 1B were nothing of consequence. Who is infecting the world with rot? Villains and vile people like the ones who were in charge of the Hero Public Commission safety. Of course, not all villains should be killed. Some need to break the law to feed themselves and their families. They should be punished but not killed. Maybe put them to work while helping their loved ones but I'm still thinking about that. As for those who hurt others just because they have the power to. They bring nothing to this world but suffering. A rot that will never help anyone. As he continued to speak, his eyes glowed brighter and brighter green. His conviction not wavering in the slightest. Aizawa wet his dry mouth. Why? Why do anything? You left a prison to do what? Wreak havoc. Izuku tilted his head. Not wreak havoc. Change needs to happen instead of waiting for more innocent people to get hurt. As for why? He pursed his lips. I have been trained to be a perfect hero all my life, but I see innocent people of Japan don't need another hero but something different. So, I don't see why I shouldn't be that something. Izuku finished with an earnest smile. Eraserhead stared at the boy for a long time. Are you a threat to me or my charges? The children. No, unless they grow to be unworthy heroes I won't touch them. The tired man couldn't help but snort a laugh. You are a child, no older than them. His mind stuck to the latter part and thought of Bakugo and Todoroki. He would have to force them to change for their own good if Izuku wasn't captured soon. Izuku pursed his lips. I guess my age is dash. He stopped and sniffed the air. What is that smell? He frowned, having never smelled such an odor. Aizawa froze and caught the scent Izuku spoke of. He turned his head from the boy to the dark sky and the glowing blue far in the distance. A fire. Just then, the communicator sounded in his ear. Eraserhead. We have villains, return to the camp immediately. Mandalay shouted. Villains attacking children. Those are the rot that I speak of. Aizawa was startled by how close Izuku was when he spoke. He was about to turn when he was picked up and flew over the trees at breakneck speeds towards the camp. He now knew how Izuku was able to move so quickly through the woods when Ragdoll was tracking him. Aizawa turned in time to see the burning forest far in the distance. He cursed their luck and turned to where the camp was located. He witnessed Vlad King shield himself against a villain shooting blue flames. He wouldn't have long. He activated his quirk just as Izuku slowed and dropped Aizawa at a distance. Faster than he could see, Izuku rocketed towards the villain. He didn't get a chance to yell as the boy engaged. One moment the villain was whole and confused at his quirk stopping, and then his head disappeared in a splatter of brown. Izuku frowned at seeing the villain dissolve into a mud-like substance. He scanned the clearing for any more villains and found nothing. He didn't wait to talk to the new hero as he rose into the sky. When he was high above the camp, he observed what was going on. Two heroes fought two villains with children nearby. Two children fought another villain. Another hunted anyone who got close. One extruded some kind of purple gas that claimed many children already. He focused on the most dire situation. A big villain loomed over a small child. His anger rose at such a sight and he shot off. It didn't take more than a second to arrive above the two. He heard the villain begin to speak, but he didn't care to listen. He pulled one stone from his pocket that looked roughly like a tree and threw it with all his force at the villain. The stone shot through the air faster than most could see and hit center mass. The villain stumbled back and raised his hand to touch his chest but failed halfway and fell onto his knees. He sat motionless in his death. He grabbed the small child and flew off to the camp. He dropped him off with Aizawa, who was talking to the other hero. Here, take the child. There is more to save. He handed off the shivering child to Aizawa and without another word, he flew off. What the F is going on? Who is that? Vlad King whispered, shouted in an attempt to keep Kota from hearing. Aizawa gritted his teeth. A vigilante is the best word for him. Izuku grabbed another stone and looked at it. He put it back. He liked how that stone glittered, so he settled on using other means. In most danger at the moment was the villain attacking the two children. He flew down at high speeds and grabbed the blonde villain with knives. She yelped and croaked as her throat was squeezed. She went limp in his grasp as his grip tightened even more and something snapped. He tossed the villain to the side without stopping his flight in the direction of the next villain. He flew high into the air and pushed himself at high speeds towards the villain with extending teeth. Feet first, he landed on the villain and slammed him into the earth. Ribs shattered, but the villain continued to try and attack. Izuku stomped on the villain's head and it splattered in front of two children who were running from the villain. Glowing green eyes looked at the scared children. He turned his attention from them and flew off. His next target was some sort of monstrosity. It could not be human, or at least not anymore. Its brain was exposed and multiple arms extended on its back. Its skin was a teal blue and it was chasing another pair of children. He landed before the thing and grabbed its chainsaw arm. He yanked the arm as he planted his foot on the creature's face. He flipped the weapon in his hand and slammed it down into the creature's exposed brain. It fell with its head split open and twitching. He turned to leave when he caught a seam in the back of the creature that began to open. A familiar woman was exposed when Izuku began to pull at the opening. One of the cat hero team was captured. Izuku frowned but ignored any theories as he turned to the two children who were running from the creature. Take this one with you. I still have others to save. Izuku gently laid the unconscious woman before the two terrified children. The girl tightened her shaking hands and approached the woman. She knelt to take stock of her as Izuku got up to leave. With a trembling voice, she asked. You aren't a villain, are you? Izuku turned his glowing green eyes on her and she flinched. I'm not a hero either. He said with a smile. He was beginning to like that phrase. The people could decide what he was, it did not matter to him. Tetsutesu and Kendo worked together to subdue the villain with the gas quirk. They got as close as they could without being seen, but bad luck came their way as Kendo stepped on a branch and it cracked in the quiet. Tetsutesu acted quickly and used his quirk to shield Kendo while rushing at the villain, but the sudden sound of a gunshot startled the two. Tetsutesu wasn't hurt, but the bullet hitting his face shook him and caused him to stumble to the side. His foot slipped and Kendo was exposed. She stared in wide-eyed terror at the barrel of the gun. She began to grow her hands to shield her, but it took time for her hands to grow, a bullet was much faster. Someone grabbed the gun and crushed it. Kendo watched as the unknown person destroyed the gun and the hand that held it. The villain began to scream in pain, but a swift backhand caused a sicking crunch. The head of the villain spun far too much and he crumpled. Izuku dropped the villain and looked at the gas. His eyes flickered to the two children who backed away from him with pale faces. The boy shielded the girl with his body, but Izuku paid them no mind, they were safe. He knew it was a bad idea to experiment with his quirk at such a time, but he had a good opportunity. So, he breathed in the purple gas and hoped his quirk was what he thought it was. He began to get dizzy, so he floated high into the air to get fresh air. The effects died down and then he lowered himself into the gas once more. Again, he got dizzy and repeated his actions. To his joy, the effects cleared up much faster. He did it once more and was ecstatic to find the gas taking longer to affect him. He grinned at finding another clue to his quirk or quirks. He moved on from his experiment to find the rest of the rot that plagued the forest. Once again, he flew high into the air. He spotted the two villains fighting against the two heroes. Near them, the other child was also hurt, but to a lesser degree. He focused on the two villains and shot forward. His foot extended and connected with the lizard villain's chest. Something cracked and the large sword amalgamation was let go. In a fluid motion, Izuku grabbed the thing that vaguely looked like a sword and spun with it to strike the other villain. It slammed just as much as it slashed the other villain in the back. The sword shattered into dozens of blades and the villain crumpled with a shattered spine. With the hilt of the remaining sword, he slashed at the villain's exposed neck and severed it. He heard the other villain scream at seeing the villain die and moved to finish the other villain. With a sonic boom, he arrived before the lizard villain and plunged the weapon down his neck into his heart. He gurgled once and then died with his own weapon. Not looking at the horrified heroes, he rose high into the air. He scanned the thick woods and ignored the children able to run back to the camp. One child did catch his eyes as he ran perpendicular to the camp. He ran after a figure running to a clearing, where two villains waited. One villain was identical to the first one he killed and the other was in a bodysuit. The last villain arrived and waved to the other two. He didn't wait any longer and shot forward with all speed. He slashed his open hand like a knife at the villain with the bodysuit just as a purple mist appeared in the clearing. The other two villains turned to see their comrade fall into two pieces with Izuku standing over the villain with the hat and mask. Did not wait for an explanation as he ran to the purple mist. He disappeared into it and the other villain turned to do the same with a wave of blue fire, but Izuku was faster. He dodged the fire and slammed his fist into the chest of the villain. Bones shattered and the villain's chest caved in. Izuku turned from the dying villain to the purple mist. Just as he began to move towards it, the mist shrunk and disappeared. He flew to where the mist was and tried to see if there was anything left. He used one of his sticks he still had to wave through the area where the mist was, but nothing happened. He frowned at having missed one villain. This attack was planned, but by who? As for why? Probably to cripple the next generation of heroes. Wouldn't be too much of a surprise. But why try to kidnap the hero? And what was that monstrosity? Izuku hummed to himself. He turned at hearing branches breaking. He saw the child who was running after the villain. He frowned at the child. Why were you chasing that villain? For glory. Or something else? Todoroki huffed in a breath. And looked around frantically. He spotted the two dead villains and froze. His eyes turned to the boy no older than he was and took him in carefully. He was hovering a few inches off the ground. But what drew his eyes the most were the glowing green eyes. Not just because of the glow but because of the resolve that lay in them. A mountain that would never erode or shake. Who are you? Where is the villain that took Bakugo? His eyes flickered to the dead villains and swallowed the bile that threatened to rise. The villain took a child. Izuku snarled in anger. He should have been faster to end them. I did not see them carrying anyone, but one escaped. The boy with red and white hair gripped his head with both hands and cursed. Make your way back to the camp, there are no threats left. Wait. Who are you? You are not a hero, you are too young. Todoroki asked. I'm Izuku. And with a smile, he said the phrase he was beginning to like. I'm not a villain either. With all the threats neutralized, Izuku floated into the air and left to relocate the children who were affected by the gas. Search setting down the last unconscious child by the others he had relocated, Izuku stood up. He had asked the homeless-looking hero how many children there were and Izuku counted 39, only one missing. Even still, that one was his fault. He could have been faster and he could have waited to experiment with his quirk at a later time. He had grown arrogant with his perceived power, thinking himself infallible. He had learned the ones around him didn't have the luxury of such power, and now one child had been kidnapped by the League of Villains as he was told. Hovering off the ground, he crossed his arms and thought about the missing child, Bakugo Katsuki. He had been trained for search and rescue operations during his time on the island. He had been drilled with procedures and ways of finding people. Most of those procedures leaned on hero infrastructure and its networks he had no access to, so that was not an option. The other way was to go to the streets and question any criminal he found. After all, if there's such a group calling themselves the League of Villains, then it should be some hints. Izuku was interrupted from his planning by the crunch of footsteps nearing him. He turned to see the other hero approach him. Behind him was the homeless hero, the cat hero team minus the one nearly kidnapped, and they didn't look friendly. His eyes flickered to all the standing students watching the scene before them. Some of them looked away in fear when he looked at them. Others, those who didn't see Izuku kill a villain in front of them, watched in anticipation, and some were tense for battle. Izuku, while I thank you for saving my students, I cannot let you go freely. The man with sharp tusks said sternly. His body was tense and ready to fight. Multiple students have admitted witnessing you murder villains. That on itself alone warrants your immediate arrest. The cat team spread out behind him, ready to support the hero. Izuku tilted his head in curiosity. He turned his body towards them and asked. Why does it matter if I killed them? Killing someone is morally wrong. The male cat started immediately. Not to mention a hard crime. I agree, but I didn't kill just someone. I killed the rot that makes Japan worse. That's not what you can decide. We have a law for a reason. If everyone decides to take the law into their own hands, then it would be chaos. The tusked hero growled. The law failed, Izuku stated. I've been free for less week and I've found the Hero Public Safety Commission's corruption in handling villains. In just one day, I've found proof of them releasing villains they knew they could handle for their public image to stay where it is now. Izuku's eyes snapped to the homeless hero and narrowed at his slight wince. And you knew about this. Underground heroes get a chance to see the darker side of work. But this does not change the fact of your crimes. Please, come peacefully. Aizawa said, gripping his scarf. The only ones I've ever killed will never bring anything good to this world and none of you will stop me. Izuku's arms uncrossed and he disappeared with the snap of the sound barrier breaking. The heroes jolted at the sudden noise and looked around for him. They heard the shouts of their charges and turned to see Izuku gripping Eraserhead's head from behind. I don't know what your quirk does, so I will avoid it. I will find Bakugo Katsuki and bring him safely back. With those last words, he shoved Eraserhead forward and then shot into the air. Aizawa rolled forward and scanned the air with his quirk activated. He cursed as he saw no sign of the boy. He touched where he had been gripped by the head. While Izuku's grip was unyielding, it wasn't painful. Eraserhead, are you hurt? Vlad King asked. The disheveled hero stood up and motioned them to calm down. No, I'm fine. Where did he head off to? He turned to the others and gave a once-over to his remaining students. Mandalay shook her head. After he was in the sky he was hard to see. The standing heroes didn't say anything after that and moved to the remaining children. Some were in more dire straits than others and they weren't caused by injury. Many of them saw villains being brutally killed in front of them by their accounts. Two heroes witnessed the action for themselves. They couldn't guess how many of the students would stay at UA after that day. Mandalay went to her nephew who was seated on the steps of the building. He was oddly calm about the unknown boy who had saved him. He didn't speak to anyone about what he saw. Izuku for his part didn't stay to watch over the group. All the children were gathered and the heroes were on high alert. If they failed to protect them, then it would be a failure on their part. With a new objective, he shot to the city. He had to begin searching for Bakugo Katsuki. The only issue was that he didn't know what the boy looked like or where to begin other than search the cedar parts of the country. His mind went to the poorer section of the city he had helped and turned in that direction. Maybe that woman could point him in a direction. Less than a half hour later, Izuku arrived at the apartment. As he flew over the section of the city, he was pleased to see no criminals lurking in the dark, and the previous gang apartment still vacant. It was late but not so late that people were asleep yet. He floated up the stairs and stepped on the ground. Knocking on the door to the woman's home, he waited. The same woman opened the door and peeked at him through the slit of the opening. Her eyes widened slightly at seeing Izuku and she slammed the door shut. Izuku was surprised for a moment before he heard a chain rattle and the door open fully. Izuku, I didn't expect you see you again. Come in. Sano Kimiko motioned him inside. Hello, Sano. I need help. Izuku said without any small talk. Not that he knew what that was. Sano looked at him warily. She had seen a description and drawing of him on the news. They were asking for any sightings of him or any information. She didn't know him at all, but she had helped their community greatly, so she kept her mouth shut. Not all that lived in her section of the city had clean hands, but none of them were red like Izuku's. Sano cleared her throat and asked. What is it? I need to find a boy, roughly my age, Bakugo Katsuki. He was kidnapped but I don't know what he looks like. She furrowed her brows and pursed her lips. I've heard that name before. She murmured as she moved to the kitchen and grabbed a laptop. She opened it and began to type on it. Who is he? A student of UA. Izuku looked over her shoulder as she operated the device he had no idea how to operate. She had a look of realization as she typed something. He was the winner of the first-year sports festival. It was the talk of the town for a while. She turned the screen to Izuku as a video played of the final match of the sports festival. Izuku watched with interest. The blonde boy with a powerful quirk blasted ice wall after ice wall to reach his opponent. He had to respect the power and skillful use of the quirk. It ended with Bakugo beating the other boy and him having to be carted off with haste. The next video played and it showed the award ceremony. His scowling face was on the screen for all to see. That's him. Sano nodded and Izuku was quiet as he stared at him. He looks perpetually angry. He tilted his head. Sano huffed a laugh. That's what I thought too. Here, I'll print his picture. She grabbed a leaf of paper that rolled out of the printer and handed it to Izuku. He took it and scanned the boy before him. When he memorized him, he folded the paper and put it in his pocket. Thank you for your help. He cut himself off with a yawn. Sano frowned slightly. When was the last time you slept? Izuku thought for a moment with a tilt of his head and she cut him off before he could respond. If you have to think about it then it's been too long. She bit her lip and nodded. Come with me. Izuku was a bit baffled as Sano took his arm and practically dragged him out of the apartment. He didn't feel any threat from her so he just went with it. Wait, what about the children? He protested slightly and looked over his shoulder to look deeper into the apartment. They should be asleep, as you should be. Sano took Izuku to the apartment adjacent to hers and opened the door with a key she pulled from her pocket. Here, the bedroom is down the hall. Bathroom across from it. Water isn't going to get all that hot but it's not freezing. Izuku let her take his hand and put the key in it. He looked up to her in confusion. She didn't say anything to the look he gave her. Get some rest. Yes, you want to go find Bakugo but doing so when tired could make you make a mistake and I don't think that's something that can be afforded with a search and rescue. With that, she smiled at him, patted his hand with the key inside, and then left him alone. Izuku turned around to the apartment and then looked down at the key. Okay. He said questioning. He set the key on the counter near the door and went to explore a bit. It was a small apartment but had all the necessities. Kitchen, which he had no idea how to use, a bathroom, and a bedroom. There was a bed, an old couch, and a table set but nothing more for furniture. He shrugged out of his clothes and lay in bed. It wasn't the most comfortable but he was tired. Sano was right, he couldn't make mistakes when he found Bakugo. So, he closed his eyes and slept. In the morning, everyone woke up to the news of UA's second attack in the year. News reporters told the story of children having to fight for their lives at the secluded camp when villains from the League of Villains attacked only to be brutally killed by an unknown third party. It was a shock to everyone when the third party was revealed to be the boy who was wanted by the heroes in the past few days. And not only was it a simple group of villains but a group of villains with their lowest ranking at C and the majority ranked at A and S. All of them died at the hand of Izuku. They didn't have much information about Izuku other than he was extremely dangerous, heavily trained, and was not afraid to kill. With his chat with the heroes, they revealed that he was classified as a vigilante for his actions the previous night. That news put some at ease knowing the person who wiped out a group of dangerous villains was on their side. Izuku thanked Sano the next morning for the bed and tried to return the key but Sano waved it off. She wanted him to keep the apartment for his time to rest and recover. While Izuku agreed that he needed a place for himself, he just wasn't sure of his feelings on the matter. After all, it was the first time someone gave something to him as such. Either way, he had a small apartment for himself. He decorated it by placing the rocks and sticks he found in the woods on the kitchen table. For the next few days, Izuku scoured the darker streets of Japan looking for Bakugo Katsuki or any information about the League of Villains or where to find them. In those few days, Izuku eradicated any villains he found. The streets and alleyways the villains thought were their territory soon discovered they were being hunted mercilessly. He questioned any villain that he thought might give him something of worth but none did. After the first day, Izuku turned to his X-ray vision to scan buildings. He mostly found civilians living their lives. Gunshots rang out in a warehouse full of dead bodies. Panicked screams cut out abruptly as Izuku cut down the villains guarding the supplies meant for the villains he dispatched an hour before. He had caught their conversation and after a quick session of questioning, he found the supplier of chemical bases used in narcotics. Izuku used one dead villain's body as a shield as he blocked the bullets flying his way. They couldn't harm him, but he didn't want to find more clothes when they were ruined. The villain screamed in panic when his dead comrade charged at him at blinding speeds. Izuku threw the bullet-ridden body at the gunman and he dashed his side to grab the firearm. A quick stomp caused the gun and hand holding it to flatten. The villain shrieked in pain at his mutilated hand. The toxic green glowing eyes showed no pity as he grabbed the man by the jaw and picked him up from under the corpse. The villain thrashed for a moment before he locked eyes with Izuku's glowing green eyes. "Do you know where the League of Villains are located?" Izuku let go of the man's jaw and such to grabbing his uninjured arm. He was still suspended in the air as Izuku floated with the villain in his grasp. The villain cried in pain once more before stuttering out an answer. "The ones who attacked that school." "Yes, what do you know?" Izuku asked calmly but felt excitement at his first possible clue. "You'll let me go." There was no response to his plea, only an expectant stare that bored deep into his soul. He sobbed out in pain at his hand. "All I know is not many go to Kamino to expand." He quickly added when the grip tightened on his uninjured arm. Wait, any dumb F who joined in attacking the school also met up near there." "Yeah. In a warehouse just like this one near Kamino." "Anything else?" When the villain shook his head, Izuku grabbed his neck with the other hand and squeezed quickly. The villain went limp and he was tossed to the side. Izuku hovered in a warehouse filled with corpses and narcotic chemicals. He crossed his arms and pinched his lower lip in thought. There could be some correlation between the two bits of information the warehouse villain said. If they were true, then Kamino would be his next place to search. He looked around at the 24 bodies and wondered where Kamino was. He rubbed his forehead and made another note to learn how to use a cell phone like Sano told him he should. It shouldn't be too hard, even her youngest child knew how to use it. Hovering to the doors leading out of the warehouse, he heard many people waiting outside. He was so lost in his thoughts of finding Kamino that his hearing tuned out the multiple hushed voices outside. He looked through the metal door and saw multiple police cars cutting off the way out. He opened the door slightly and a spotlight shone on his face peeking out. He quickly scanned the area and closed the door just when a megaphone shouted for him to surrender. "I'm sure there is a window I can fly out of," Izuku said to himself. Glass shattered as cylinders were thrown inside through said escape paths. Unknown gas began to spew out of them. Well, the roof should do. He scanned the other side to make sure no one would get injured. When he saw it was clear, Izuku rocketed through the thin metal roof and penetrated it easily. Looking down at the street before the warehouse, he saw a somewhat familiar large man before the police. The man looked up at Izuku with his sunken deep blue eyes. The large man crouched down and leapt up to Izuku in a flash. "SHT," Izuku cursed for the first time. More out of surprise than panic. "Not so fast, young man," All Might said with a grin. Izuku didn't engage in any wordplay as he dodged downward. He could see the large man rocketing upward had no visible way of changing trajectory, so the best solution was to use that to his advantage. All Might failed to grab him but he didn't give up as he punched up to reverse his momentum. He rocketed back to where Izuku dodged. "I've seen that trick too many times to fool me." The number one hero laughed. One large hand grabbed Izuku by the arm. He reacted immediately by lashing out with a punch with his free hand which was caught with some effort by All Might's other hand. He looked surprised at the strength Izuku was able to output. That surprise caused the kick to his side to connect fully. He didn't believe the kick would hurt the man so much since the strength to catch his punch was high. All Might let go of one of Izuku's arms to clutch at his side. To All Might's surprise, Izuku grabbed his other arm and floated them down to the streets. "What are you doing, my boy?" All Might asked through a mouthful. "It was not my intention to injure you so gravely. It was my mistake to think you had a higher resistance to damage. I just figured if you were so strong then." Izuku winced as he set the number one hero down on an empty street. He held the man upright as he wheezed. "I can fly you to a hospital." All Might pulled Izuku down and shook his head. "What has happened to me can't be healed, many have tried. You did not do this to me, only exasperated an old wound," he said with a rough laugh. Izuku furrowed his brows. His reason for being created made more sense now if the HPSC knew of All Might's injury. It was only a matter of time before he took a blow he could not recover from. If Izuku was less restrained than he was then he would mercilessly hit that weak point and possibly win against the man, but he would do no such thing. But a strong enough villain would have no such qualms in doing such a thing if they knew. "Izuku, that is your name?" All Might asked. When he nodded, All Might continued. "There are many who wanted to speak to you and I am one of them. I thank you for protecting my students." Izuku scowled slightly. "I failed to protect one, I became negligent when I felt invincible. Due to that, one villain escaped with Bakugo Katsuki. I will find him." He looked at All Might with conviction. The number one hero believed the boy would find his belligerent student. He could feel the power Izuku held and how to use it, but that was not his task at the moment. "While I admire your way of seeing your mistakes, I cannot let you go. Please, come with me peacefully, young Izuku." Izuku smiled at the number one hero. "I can see why you are the best. Even with all that power, you still wish to settle things peacefully." All Might's hopes were drowned when Izuku's eyes began to glow a brighter green. "But I have more work to do and you will not be around forever. While I will never bring what you give to the people of Japan, I will make sure the innocent will always be safe and free." He finished with a smile. All Might's grip tightened on Izuku's arm. He didn't want to hurt the boy who was no older than his students, but he felt the strength in the kick he received. With his arm still being held, Izuku stuck out with his other fist. The number one hero blocked with his forearm and brought his knee up to cover his injured side. Izuku saw the opportunity and kicked at the single leg holding the massive man up. All Might stumbled and Izuku pushed forward with both his strength and flight. The wind was knocked out of the large man while Izuku maneuvered to get his arm free. With all his strength, Izuku launched an elbow into All Might's forearm. The impact sounded like thunder as two great forces collided. "SHT," All Might cursed at the pain of the muscles in his arm contracting uncontrollably after the impact. Izuku began to slip out of his grasp and saw his other hand coming to grab him. So he feigned an attack on his weak side. It was enough for All Might to block the fake hit. Another strike at All Might's arm in the same location caused his hand to loosen enough to slip out of his grasp. One last kick to the number one hero's face disoriented the man enough to escape. Izuku rocketed off without waiting or exchanging last words. The hero was fast to recover and get on his feet, but Izuku was gone. "Well, SHT," Yagi Toshinori cursed to himself and winced at his side. He tried to wipe it with his hand, but it was still spasming from Izuku's strikes to free himself. A bruise was already forming where Izuku's elbow struck. With one last look to the sky, All Might returned to the ambush point. Not just a killer, that was a quick response time. Was it planned or just a coincidence? They must have been on high alert for me, so maybe just that. Izuku tapped his lower lip with his finger in thought while drifting above the clouds. "I wonder if I could beat him," he pondered. Obviously, he wasn't trying to kill me, only subdue me. He handicapped himself with that alone and the fact we were in a semi-populated area too. That wound of his was also a large weakness. He hummed to himself in thought. I wasn't trying to kill him either, so maybe. He shrugged and began to make his way down. Now, on to Kamino. He stared down at the continent of Japan and its beauty. I wish I knew Kamino was. He sighed quietly to himself with slumped shoulders. It took a while to figure out where Kamino was and which direction it was. Izuku flew high above the buildings with his vision penetrating the exterior to see if he could find Bakugo Katsuki quickly that way. He quickly scanned the building for people and then ignored them if they didn't match up with the members of the League of Villains or Bakugo. Of course, he had to swoop down on many occasions to end rotting roots from digging deeper in Japan, but he was quick about it. One after another, Izuku cleared streets in the Kamino ward quickly. He was trying to be careful with taking out villains. If he began to wipe out all the villains in Kamino, then the League of Villains would be alerted that he was in Kamino and flee. So he only killed the villains he saw were doing immediate harm to others. As Izuku flew over another street in Kamino, he saw the villain from the camp. The villain with a white mask took Bakugo Katsuki and the one who escaped him. He didn't have the mask on or the hat, but he had the same clothes. He scanned the man with his vision and quickly found the mask in his jacket. With narrowed eyes, he watched the villain as he scurried in the alleyways. Izuku could see the nervous expression on his face and the steady tremble in his hands as he looked around frequently. He wanted to sweep down and grab the villain, but the quirk was unknown. It was ingrained into him to be wary of all people with quirks he didn't know. After all, it only took one mistake to end his life, and they didn't allow him to make mistakes. So he watched the villain leave the alleyways and change out of the notable jacket to blend into the crowds of innocent people. He gritted his teeth when he saw the man slip his hands into passerby pockets and leave with valuables. His eyes focused on the blue marble that went into a pocket from a passerby. He watched it happen 3 more times until he had a good idea what his quirk was. Some sort of storage quirk. With enough information gathered, Izuku waited for the right time to strike. When he crossed a street, Izuku dove down and grabbed his arms. The villain reacted quickly and tried to break free by kicking him, but Izuku took the blow without an issue. Now they were high in the sky and the villain slowed in his attempt to free himself after seeing how high they were. Look, I don't know who you are, but if you let me go I'll give everything I have. I'm sure we can. He trailed off as he stared into the toxic green glowing eyes of Izuku and recognized him. Fear coursed through his veins. You remember me, good, Izuku said to the shivering villain. Where is he? The villain cried out in pain as his wrist was slowly crushed. Wait. Hold on. Let's make a deal. I'll tell Dash, he cut off as he screamed in agony. Izuku crushed the wrist and tore off the remaining gore. I am not negotiating. He grabbed the villains with his bloody hand and tightened it slightly to emphasize his threat. Where is Bakugo Katsuki? The villain known as Compress sobbed in pain as he watched the remains of his hand fall to the land far below them. He could only hope that by telling him where the League of Villains' hideout was, he would be let free. By stuttering out a response, he told Izuku. Close to the bay. Rundown bar near the business district. The not-a-hero scanned the land below him and found the bay and the section of the city that could be categorized as a business area. Now, find the bar in that section. He turned his attention back to the shivering villain. He stiffened as he saw Izuku's eyes. He began to fight but fell limply as his neck was crushed completely. Suddenly, his pockets bulged as numerous things lost the effects of his quirk. Wallets, phones, money, jewelry, and other odds and ends. Large stones, a small boat, a bicycle, a few bottles of alcohol, and some weapons. Izuku cursed to himself as he moved quickly to stop the falling objects from hurting anyone. It took some quick maneuvering, but nothing was damaged if you don't count the bottles of alcohol falling on an empty rooftop. He grabbed the few wallets he could and kicked the larger objects into the distant bay where the water would hide them. He sighed in relief at stopping all the debris and ignored the few happy shouts of people who found jewelry at their feet or money fluttering down. He moved on looking for Bakugo Katsuki and dropped off the villain's corpse at the front entrance of a nearby police station with all the wallets he was able to catch. He paid no mind to the money that landed in civilians' hands. He couldn't imagine trying to take the money from them, so he just chalked the loss to villain encounters. Just as Izuku moved to crest the area he was told the bar was, he took note of the explosion in the distance. He paused. He looked at the bridge with traffic at a standstill with a plum of fire coming from the center. As he watched, a cable that held the bridge up suddenly snapped. The bridge swayed and Izuku shot in the direction where morning traffic was beginning to start their day badly. Death Arms was not having a good day. He started his night shift by being updated on Izuku. He was told not to engage with the teen unless necessary. After keeping an eye open for the crusading teen, the night dragged on. Nothing special of note happened other than the standard drunken fights or petty crimes. Nothing until the end of his shift when an incident occurred on a suspension bridge and he was called for support. He didn't get the full story until later, but a civilian recognized a wanted criminal and the criminal caught on to what was happening when police began to surround his vehicle in traffic. The criminal turned desperate and used his quirk to accelerate his vehicle. His vehicle bull rushed forward and flipped many under its momentum. Bad circumstances lined up perfectly for one vehicle to damage the suspension cable. After the strained cable snapped, things got worse as the loaded bridge began to shudder under its uneven weight. Death Arms repeatedly cursed loudly as he tore car doors off their hinges to help civilians escape from the collapsing bridge. He checked each vehicle's seat and moved on as the bridge creaked more and more. While he was strong, he didn't like his chances of surviving a bridge collapsing with him on it. He pushed on through his fears in search of any civilians left behind. His ears caught on a cry for help and quickly moved in that direction. His face paled when he saw multiple young faces inside a van pinned against the suspension cable that snapped. The bridge tilted precariously where the van was. Not good, not good. Death Arms cursed to himself as he moved to pull the van away from the edge of the bridge and unpin it to get the children out. He felt dread as he ran down the decline of the bridge to get to the van. As he got closer, he saw the bloodied figure of a woman behind the steering wheel and a small child sobbing as she tried to wake the adult up. Some of the others banged on the windows to escape, but they were too weak to make any progress. He got to the van and began to help by moving the cable out of the way only for the bridge to shudder. He moved quickly and grabbed the van to pull away from the edge. He began to make progress, but when the bridge began to tilt even more he felt panic. A car began to slide in his direction as he dragged the van away from the edge. Setting his feet, he released one hand from the van and braced to stop the car from pushing them into the river below. He groaned in strain as he balanced between pulling the van and pushing the car that was trying to kill them. The screams of the few children inside the van pushed him on and he growled in effort. Suddenly, he began to push the car back and pull the van much easier. Not only that, but the bridge began to stabilize slightly. He turned his head to the edge of the bridge and saw intensely glowing green eyes. The notorious teen, Izuku, was holding up the bridge with his bare hands. Where the cable snapped from, Izuku's hands dug into the metal as he held his place. Stunned, Death Arms only began to move again when Izuku spoke. "Hurry up," he said calmly but with evident strain. The hero didn't hesitate and began by tearing the damaged van door off its hinges for the children. Then he moved on to the woman and did the same but gently checked her over. Once he was satisfied that she was just unconscious, he picked her up, and the youngest child in his arms. He told the tear-streaked children who could run to follow him. He threw one last glance at Izuku, who he gave a thankful nod to, and began to evacuate the last people on the bridge. Izuku for his part breathed calmly as he focused on holding onto the bracket that was supposed to hold the suspension cable. Holding his place in mid-air was also becoming difficult. It felt like mud trying to drag him down, and every time he unstuck his feet the bridge shifted ever so slightly. Not only that, but he could feel the metal bracket begin to deform. He didn't know for how long it would last, but he would do his best to hold it until the end. A news helicopter had arrived not far behind Izuku. It hovered far from the bridge as the news reporter narrated what had happened and who was at the scene of the collapsing bridge. The camera panned from Death Arms successfully arriving at the other end of the bridge with the woman being handed off to an ambulance with the children sticking near her. The camera stopped at a pair of green glowing eyes. The news reporter began to yell into the microphone about the young man who had been on the news all over Japan. Labeled as a deadly vigilante, Izuku was now watched as he held up a bridge for search and rescue to save any remaining civilians. To be completely honest, I do not know what to think of this young man. I agree he is a criminal for murdering numerous villains, but not once has he hurt any innocent civilians. The news reporter said into the microphone. Most notable was when Izuku saved UA's Class 1A from another villain attack from the League of Villains. While his methods were extreme and violent, he did prevent a disaster by stopping multiple known serial murders at the camp where Class 1A was supposedly hidden. The camera stayed on the young man who steadily held the bracket as people ran through vehicles in search of any remaining civilians. What could be running through his mind at this moment? We will never know. Please hurry up, I'm getting hungry, Izuku mumbled quietly to the search and rescue teams. None of them heard him as he spoke too quietly, but Izuku took some mirth in the situation. It's been just over an hour since he arrived and he had not shifted in his position for fear of causing the bridge to destabilize. He was sure there were no more civilians on the bridge since he scanned all the vehicles with his X-ray vision, and there were no more rescue operations ongoing on the bridge, so he just stayed where he was. After all, his lessons on the island did not cover the protocol of holding up a bridge or for how long. A police helicopter soon arrived near his location and hovered over the water. A megaphone shouted at him. Heroes specialized in supporting collapsing structures are coming soon, hold on for a short time longer. Izuku nodded and the helicopter flew off after that. It was nice to see the professionals working with him. It wasn't long before he watched a large boat with many heroes on board move from the shore to under his location. As he waited and held the bridge up, a familiar face flew up to greet him. Her hair was shorter, but she seemed healthy as Nijire flew up from under the bridge with a bright smile. Hey, hey. She greeted cheerfully. Good to see you well. Izuku greeted in return. Well, except for your hair, I suppose. The girl pouted and touched her hair. You can't believe how annoyed I was when I woke up to see my hair curls burned off. But hair grows back, so no biggie. Thank you for shielding me from Endeavor's blast. She curled her lips slightly at having to say the name of the number 2 hero. Izuku chuffed a quiet laugh at her reaction. He would have expected her to be more off-put at one of her co-workers nearly killing her, but was happy to see she was safe. I'm guessing you are here to inform me about what they are doing under me. Yep. Got it in one. Basically, they are making a pillar of concrete to support the bridge. It might take some time because they have to go deep underwater to find a solid base to begin building on. Cementos, one of my teachers at UA, is really good with concern, so he will be forming the column. Nijire explained. Izuku let the young woman ramble on her explanation. I see. He replied. It was quiet for a moment as Nijire peeked over the edge of the bridge and then returned. She hovered around him and examined him from every angle. He kept still as she looked at him, mostly because of the threat of the bridge collapsing if he moved wrong. Nijire, what are you doing? He didn't feel as if she was looking for an opportunity to capture him, but more as if she was curious about him. How are you flying? I don't see any wings, air distortions, or anything of the sort. Is it telekinesis? Or are you making the air solid under you? She tapped the air under his feet. Nope, not that. Hey. Are you going to tell me or not? He raised an eyebrow at her actions but mentally shrugged and added it to her being odd. I don't know, I've only been able to fly for a month. I just push myself to move in a direction and I do. He didn't see any harm in letting her know to tell others. She hummed in thought. That's weird. Wait, what do you mean you have only been able to fly for a month? What about being super strong and durable? She flexed her arm to shower her toned muscles in emphasis. It's as I said, it's relatively new. As for my other abilities, I do not know, it's hard to tell. It might all be facets of my quirk or multiple quirks. They never told me what they did to me. Nijire was reminded that he was an experiment conducted by the Hero Public Safety Commission. Just as she was going to open her mouth to say something, the support bracket Izuku was gripping groaned. The two teens looked at the metal and then at each other. Nijire raised her hands and patted the air. "Don't move." Just as Izuku was about to speak, she shouted again. "No moving." She tapped the communicator in her ear and spoke to the lead who was building the support pillar under the bridge. The bridge groaned. It did it again as she spoke. It did it again. Izuku listened to the one-sided conversation as he did his best to stay still and not dig his fingers into the metal, but he felt he knew the bracket was about to break. "Nijire, it's going to break," he said calmly but urgently. Nijire repeated what he said to the communicator and then nodded. She turned to him. "Do you have any ideas?" she asked sheepishly. Izuku stared at her dumbfounded. "Ask for help. They don't have any strong flyers like you, and M lady is on her way, but she might not be able to help. I was told to improvise. Wait. I'll go under and begin to push up with my quirk." She moved to do so and the bracket snapped off the bridge. "Not good." Izuku tossed the scrap metal in his hand and bolted after Nijire under the bridge. She was already pushing with her waves of energy from under the bridge, but it was slowly coming down. He quickly scanned the underside of the bridge and found a steel beam that looked like it should hold the whole length of the bridge. He flew up to it, put his shoulders under it, and pushed up. The whole structure groaned again but stopped coming down. Izuku groaned instead at the uncomfortable position he was in. The metal dug into his shoulders and he was beginning to tire. "Great. Now, stay still," Nijire shouted. "Thank you for your guidance." He snarked back. He didn't blame her, of course, but it felt nice to make the sarcastic remark. So, Izuku held up the bridge while the heroes and construction staff frantically built the support pillar. He watched them as they fluidly transferred material from boat to boat and then shaped the materials into the climbing pillar. Concrete flowed like water to solidify and steel beams added support to the pillar. With a final layer of concrete and steel, Izuku was told to lower the bridge. Everyone watched with bated breaths as the bridge settled on the pillar and stopped. It held, and anyone who had a helping hand in building the structure cheered loudly. Izuku sagged in relief and again felt his belly rumble for food. He looked around and slowly began to hover backward. He paused when he caught Nijire's side eye, but she didn't move to stop him. With that, Izuku flew off to find food and rest. He still needed to find Bakugo Katsuki, but he was in no state to fight if he found him. He needed rest. Gaining allies. It was late morning when Izuku stumbled through the apartment door he had been gifted by Sano. His whole body was sore to the point of being in pain with each step he took. Holding a multi-ton bridge up with his body exhausted him greatly. He tried to float off the ground, but he felt tired when he did so and his muscles were not any better. He wanted to continue to search for Bakugo Katsuki now that he finally found a lead in a district, but he had to admit to himself that he couldn't go on without resting after holding up the bridge. Showering felt like bliss on his tired body. Once done, he lay in the old bed and slept for the rest of the day. His dreams were forgotten as the hours passed. Nizu replayed the video of a young man holding up the bridge with his power alone. He had rewatched the video a half-dozen times in an attempt to glean anything from the boy, but all he could see was a man willing to do anything to keep people safe. If that meant holding a bridge up while rescue evacuated civilians on said bridge, then he would do so. Nizu sighed through his nose and thought of the school year that kept getting worse and worse. He had already received 2 transfer notices from 2 students for 1A and 1 from 1B. He wished to say they were overreacting, but he couldn't anymore. The Chimera looked up from the computer to the 2 people seated in his office. "You've both interacted with Izuku. Tell me what you think of the young man." Yagi Toshinori and Aizawa Shota sat before the creature. The 2 didn't respond immediately, but 2 things they agreed on was that Izuku was extremely dangerous and well trained. Eraserhead spoke first. "His training is extensive to the extreme. I've seen veterans move more sloppily than he does when he fought. That would be an issue alone, but whatever his quirk is amplifies everything to the extreme. I've seen the injury reports on the villains that attacked the camp and everyone was murdered like they were nothing. Not even muscular lasted a second against him, the remains of a stone were scattered in his chest causing his organs to be shredded. From what I've seen he can fly at high speeds, strong enough to escape from All Might's grasp, and durable enough to shield Nijire from Endeavor's fire. That also might include enhanced senses, but that is just guesswork right now, along with whatever caused those burns in the HPSC's office. He finished with a sigh and rubbed his forehead. All Might nodded along. I believe he covered all of it. He looked to Nizu. We need to find a way to speak to him. We can't let him continue killing villains. Just look at the good he can do if he were brought to our side. He pointed to the screen with Izuku with the bridge on his shoulders. Nizu stared at his desk for a long moment as he thought. What do you think of the boy? Not of his power and skills but of the boy himself. Yagi and Aizawa looked at each other for a brief moment. They had the same thought and Yagi gave words to it. His conviction is high. He has set his mind to help Japan in his way. Aizawa nodded with the conclusion. But I am sure I can talk him down. I just need a chance. The principal did not say that All Might would never convince the boy to change his ways. He had seen others with the same conviction and they all ended up dead because they didn't have the strength to survive. But Izuku. He has enough strength to survive for his convictions to come true and his skills will push him even further. He can feel the change happening day by day since Izuku had appeared. Japan will change and Nizu did not know how it would end up. All he could do was prepare for the worst. As Izuku slept, the video of him holding the bridge up while search and rescue evacuated the remaining people on the bridge spread like wildfire through Japan. People have seen the news related to his rising infamy in the hero society, but now things have changed. Now, Japan sees a powerful young man helping dozens while the bridge is evacuated. They see Izuku never hurt anyone remotely innocent and only villains. At first, people thought he was another hero killer stain, but he was different as more people investigated his crimes. While not many such to his side, many saw him in a different light. His killing of violent criminals was beginning to change the views of people. It wasn't until late afternoon that Izuku woke up. His sore muscles were gone and his quirk, or quirks, was back to normal. He was expecting lingering strain on himself after pushing himself so far with the bridge, but to his surprise, he felt better than before. He chalked it up to resting and his ability to adapt, but that changed when he went to his door and crushed the doorknob without meaning to. Izuku stared at the deformed metal in his hand, dumbfounded at his carelessness. He didn't understand how his strength got away from him. He let go of the metal and frowned down at his hand. Izuku gently touched the deformed metal and felt that easily he could bend it. Before that day he could do the same, but he knew how to limit his strength to not damage anything, but now he felt stronger than before. Gently, Izuku used 2 fingers to turn the doorknob. He winced again when he still managed to squeeze the metal a bit too hard. Watching every moment, Izuku floated off the ground in fear of damaging any more of the apartments by accident. He made a note to find a way to fix the doorknob as he made his way to the exit. As he was halfway turning the doorknob to the apartment's hallway, there was a knock on the other side that caused him to crush the handle. He winced and then opened the door fully to see a startled Sano with her hand raised to knock once again. Izuku looked at the doorknob and then at Sano apologetically. "I'll fix it, sorry. My strength has gotten away from me and I don't understand why." He tried to feel a difference in his body but felt nothing odd. Sano furrowed her brows in confusion but moved on. "Izuku, I wanted to talk to you if you have a moment." When he nodded, she waited to be let in but realized he most likely didn't know to do so. "Can I come in?" He moved to the side and she walked inside. Never having been taught how to treat guests in his home, Izuku just stared at Sano awkwardly. She just glanced around and looked at the thing he had found and brought back with him. Shiny stones smoothed by his hands, pieces of wood that have been carved crudely, and other smaller things as such. Sano bit her fingernail for a moment in thought and glanced at Izuku. The community that she lived in knew of Izuku and what he had done. They knew he was the one who got rid of the gang, threatening all of them while heroes did nothing. They knew he gave them the money that was being used for drags and armaments when he had every right to just leave with his spoils. They knew from her that he was a young inexperienced man who escaped his confinement and worked on righting the county in his way. They also knew of what Izuku living near them risked. So, they sent her to talk to him. To either stay and protect their community when law enforcement came for Izuku and caught them in the crossfire, or leave for their protection. Are you planning to stay? Sano started and immediately added afterward. I'm not telling you to leave, but some problems will come and the community wanted me to come talk to you about them. She finished with a long breath. Izuku furrowed his brows and listened to her heartbeat. She was nervous, that was obvious, but there was more. So he listened to what she had to say. If I have to leave, I will. But I believe you don't want me to. Why? Wouldn't I being here bring you into the crossfire when heroes or villains inevitably find where I sleep? She stared at him, startled slightly at saying what she was thinking. She had to ask. She remembered the night he mentioned his quirk or quirks. Can you read minds? Izuku made a weird face at the question. He tried to parse why she would ask but shook his head at the end. No, why? She sighed in relief. There are a few places in the world where someone deserves some privacy from everyone, and one place is their mind. She waved her hand in dismissal of the question. You just said exactly what the community was worried about. But enough of that. Sano breathed in and looked straight at his slightly glowing green eyes. You're right, you do pose a risk in staying near all these families. She cut him off just as he was going to speak. But, you also helped us. You did more for us in one day than heroes did for us in years. I'm sure you noticed all the improvements we have made with the money you've given us. Truthfully, Izuku hadn't noticed or paid attention, but he didn't say that. So, yes. Your being here does bring risk as you said, but it also brings protection. Every time another gang even gets close to us, you get rid of them. You should do that yourselves too. If the heroes won't do anything to help, then protect yourselves with quirks and all. I will also keep them away, but not times I am unavailable. Izuku interjected. Sano nodded slowly in agreement. I will bring that up with them later, but back on point. The big question is, will you stay? Relatives of the families have already begun to move into the area just for your protection. They have heard from the others and come for the safety that other poor communities lack. Will you stay and help protect us as we help you? She breathed out and waited for his response. The boy who was formerly known as Subject 1 furrowed his brows in thought. He spoke after a short moment. What of the risks? It's only a matter of time until heroes or villains come looking for me. I plan to leave before that, but you want me to stay. Sano nodded. We discussed that and chose to tie ourselves to you. She laughed with bitterness. Heroes refuse to do their jobs and police take an hour to arrive at a crime scene. We think you can make things change for the better. A lot of us don't like to see the violent way you do things, but we understand. We see repeat criminals wreak havoc time and time again with deaths stacking up. I would rather see the bodies of villains litter the streets than our children and families. Will it be tough? Most definitely. Will it be worth having safety for our families? She looked straight at him and answered. Yes. I want my children to grow up without worrying about criminals around every corner. As for the heroes, we'll come up with something when the time comes. He saw the resolve in her eyes and knew she was willing to stand behind him for the safety he brought. The safety heroes failed to provide. Izuku sighed and scratched his eyebrow. Okay, I'll say. Sano beamed at the response. But what do you mean about helping me? And with what? Sano began to explain. Well, a lot of things. You sort of don't know anything. She saw him wince and apologize quickly. And that's understandable. But that is what we can help with. We can cook and clean. When was the last time you cleaned anything? When he didn't answer, she continued. A few of us have skills to find what you need, like me helping you find Bakugo Katsuki's profile, and I'm sure more people will come with better skills or even quirks that can do a better job. She quickly began to ramble. I've even heard of a man who worked with hero suits who was fired for some nonsense reason. I'm sure if we can find him, we can get you some clothes that don't make you look like you grabbed whatever from the lost and found. Izuku looked at his clothing options and felt slightly offended by her comment. He quite liked the jacket he wore. He shook his head and focused back on what she and the community were planning. So, what now? Do I need to do anything different? Shaking her head with a smile and hopeful look, she responded. Just keep protecting us as you have been, we will help you with everything we can. Like food, I'm sure I can cook something up for you. She moved to the fridge and opened it to see nothing. She turned her head to Izuku, who quickly averted his eyes. What have you been eating? I don't know how to cook, so I buy things to eat. Like Katsudon, and he trailed off when he realized that was all he'd eaten since escaping the island. Seeing the blush beginning to CRP up his neck, she stopped questioning. She thought it looked adorable on the young man but focused on helping him in whatever she could. We'll get you fresh food and teach you to cook sometime. For now, let's go to my place, and let me cook something for you before you leave to continue your search for Bakugo. She looked at him. Are you still looking for him? He nodded with a sigh. I've got a lead in the area. The Kamino Business District, rundown bar. He was about to deny her cooking but held his tongue. If he was going to stay and protect the community, then some cooking in return should be fine. His thoughts on the matter had nothing to do with his growing hunger. She smiled. That's something we can help up with. It's not too hard to search the internet for those details. She pulled out her phone and messaged someone the information. Come on, I'm sure I can find something you'll like. Izuku just obediently followed her out of his apartment and to hers. He floated all the while not touching anything lest he break it with his unrestrained strength. Her apartment looked just as before but better in some ways. Some of the damaged parts of the apartment, like the leaking ceiling, were fixed and newer appliances replaced the old rattling rusted ones. The children had newer clothes while the kitchen looked much more full of food. Sano motioned him to sit and rest while she began to cook. Izuku did so and sat on the couch with the children watching him. He awkwardly waved at them and the boy turned back to the TV while the girl hopped onto her feet and climbed onto the couch next to him. He looked at her as she stared at him. She reached for his hand and Izuku resisted the urge to rip his hand away for fear of hurting the child unintentionally, but instead completely relaxed his arm and let her grab onto it. She examined his hand in search of something. Spreading fingers, poking his forearm muscles, and even bending his digits to uncomfortable positions. He didn't resist her manipulations. How did you lift that bridge when you look normal? She finally asked. Oh, right. I am Maki Sano, it's nice to meet you. She said politely. Izuku smiled at her actions and gently shrugged. It's my quirk, I think. It helps me become stronger, I think. Mom said you came from an island. The boy turned from the TV. You're supposed to introduce yourself. The girl, Maki, admonished her bigger brother. He rolled his eyes with a sigh. Aizawa, so did you? He asked again. When Izuku nodded, Maki jumped into the conversation. Mom said not to ask him about that stuff. Mom. Play nice, Sano said over her shoulder in the kitchen. Aizawa scowled at his sister but turned back to Izuku. You said your quirk makes you stronger, how? Do you know? Izuku shook his head. Not entirely, I believe it's some sort of adaptation quirk. I grew incredibly stronger overnight after helping with the bridge. Ia broke a few things by accident when I realized my strength changed. He finished sheepishly. Now, you're too strong. Oh, like the anime I'm watching when the protagonist got a huge level up and needed to practice his moves so he knew how to limit himself. Aizawa finished with the comparison. The young man didn't know what anime was but turned his attention to him. And that helped with being too strong. Izuku thought about his negligent training and combat moves. He could do them alone and it would be idiotic to forget about combat form even if it's unnecessary to use it for most fights. He nodded in thought and made up his mind. He needed to practice his moves like Aizawa said to find a way to limit himself, otherwise he would end up breaking more things. He still needed to fix the doorknobs in his apartment and made a mental note to buy them when he left to find Bakugo Katsuki. His mind pushed everything else to the side as the odors of Sano's cooking wafted into the living room. He now knew what he was missing when he bought his food from strangers. Sano called them to come and eat and they obeyed without question. His search for Bakugo Katsuki could wait for a moment longer.